The Merry Pranksters, Chapter 13, Episode 1. The chorus of Oliver's army is marching through my head with all the bells and whistles of a frantic carnival ride, and it's loud and annoyingly British, and it's playing on repeat. As Dickie stands, his elbow resting on the cowskin bar stool, he's rolling his pool stick back and forth around the web of his hand like a magic trick, waiting for me to take my shot. Pacing the length of the table, wiping the sweat from my brow and eyeing the cue ball from every angle, I'm faced with the stabbing realization that in times like these, there are no solutions, only trade-offs. The seemingly intentional way Dickie keeps ignoring his buzzing phone causes my jaw to suddenly clench shut, and the way he softly whistles an innocent ballad is giving me the overwhelming feeling that I would rather be absolutely anywhere else than here today. An acute curiosity has begun to brew around a few issues that are adding fuel to this already flaming dumpster fire. Most urgently, that the handful of pills Fuchs slipped me earlier may not have been the 5-milligram Xanny footballs he claimed they were after all. While Dickie is bent down close to the green felt table eyeing his shot, I squint narrowly at him, then at the television, suspiciously wondering if he's not somehow in on it all. I wave a distraught finger towards the screen and ask if he's been following any of this. Scrolling along the bottom of the television screen, I find myself mouthing along to the CNC chyron that reads, "The FBI confirmed it has filed formal charges against 34-year-old Raymond Salazar, documented Kirk supporter, as a member of the far-right group The Rebellion." As usual, the photo has pixeled out his face, but Ray Salazar is wearing what appears to be a homemade Han Solo costume. Unfazed, Ben Gaffeld, the shiny plastic newscaster with the retro-framed spectacles, looks as though he's heard enough, nodding along obediently as if to say, "It's about damn time." The headline continues. 23 high-level intelligence officials from both the FBI and the CIA have signed a letter confirming the widely debunked video of Congressman Shapiro's daughter, Bethany, at a club in Mexico has all the dangerous markings of foreign disinformation. The Bureau is now seeking to subpoena Horace's internal database. It's not anger, necessarily, that I feel as much as bewilderment at all this smoke and mirrors. It's becoming clear that warm human blood does not pulse through that humanoid. Hair does not grow in like that naturally, not that color, and not with that durability. And real people don't talk or think that way. Oozing with snark, he says, "I don't know if these people understand how time works. It begs the question, at what point do these malicious accusations finally reach full-blown anti-Semitism?" Implying that her kidnapper has a private jet, flying her to Europe, Japan, and now there are sightings of her in Mexico? Let's hope they find the racists spreading this filth. Dickie stood by the side of the pool table with a cube of chalk held paused over the tip of the Viking cue stick. He did not resume ecking out the blue chalk until he flashed me a glance with such curious merriment that I knew I must be narrating out loud my train of thought. Then he smiled and blew the remaining dust from the tip. He hadn't called me crazy yet, but once I started ranting about MK Ultra and the CIA waging intellectual terrorism through manufactured psyops, he laid it on thick. He asked me if I need a drink, and when I wave him off, he slowly walks a cup of hot tea over to me anyway and places it in my hand. Cupping the glass delicately, I take in small sips, look him square in the eye and ask, "Are we really supposed to pretend the girl in the video isn't her? Like we're not even supposed to talk about it?" "Try to not let it get to you, mijo," he reassures me. "A hot Jewish American princess partying it up in old Mexico is a tale as old as time." Once he sees me begging in a hopeless whisper, "But does he believe it?" Dickie's brow furrows with concern. He takes the cup of tea from my hand and, looking me dead in the eye, asks if I've ever heard about Chinese mind torture. I had never questioned Dickie's loyalty before today, but there's a cold wind blowing that says his allegiances are now on the table. Firing up a blunt of Godfather OG, he starts telling me that under pressure, people can be driven mad by outside forces. It's a gradual process of slowly turning up the heat, like the frog in the boiling pot, he says, bogarting the blunt before passing it over to me. The first step is getting people to accept lies as truth, man. They start small. Something trivial, like unemployment not being a problem under communism. Once you've bought into that, that's when they start turning the screws. While my left brain is nodding along, the right side is watching his body language closely to see if it's not in fact Dickie who is holding the screwdriver. Yeah, I know it sounds crazy, Schultz, but how do you think you sound yelling at the TV all the time? But no, man, I don't think there's some nefarious conspiracy. It's just how people are, Smart dogs are the easiest to train. They brainwash all the bookworms so they can dismiss the rest of us dumbasses for daring to question their brilliance. We're tribal creatures, It's dangerous to stray too far from the herd. That makes it easy to gaslight most people into believing you're just a small outlier. Once they get people to discard these ideas, at that point, any petty tyrant can turn otherwise rational people into true believers. It's all conditioning, he says. And while I do know, I also know that that's just what a maniacal sociopath would say. Suspiciously, he quotes, "Once they can get you to believe absurdities, they can get you to commit any number of atrocities, Holmes." The grandfather clock chimed a few times, and it continued chiming until finally I surrendered to his hypnosis. I get up to take a slash, praying I'll get lucky and find a moldy Soma tab behind the toilet, and when I return, Dickie is Googling tranquilizer darts. With a hopeful gleam in his eye, he hands me a folded piece of paper and says, as if he believes it will not turn me into a fire-breathing dragon, "Hey man, it looks like Valerie stopped by." The instinct to flee causes the blood to drain from my head, leaving my face a ghostly shade of pale. Has he gotten to her too? Who else, I wonder, and how far do his tahine-laced tentacles reach? I shout, "What the balls?" snatching the folded paper written in dreaming out loud font from his hand. Checking the telephone for taps, my eyes narrow to give the room a brief yet ruthless inspection. I catch Dickie waving his hand in front of my face, fishing for eye contact. "Oi, Schultz, you in there?" He walks behind the bar, rolling up the sleeves of his denim shirt. Tossing a towel over his shoulder, he asks me what's got my knickers in a bunch and tells me I look like shit. "Let me whip you up something," he says in a friendly way that could be a trap. Unsure how much to reveal, I keep it simple. "Well, Dickie, I suppose it all began shortly after I started taking benzodiazepine recreationally." After some exhausting backstory, I try to walk him through some of the more devastating events of the past few days. Working in, the fact that I ran out of pills didn't help any, I can tell you that. Spinning the cap off of a pearl-white bottle of Class Azul Respondo, he nods for me to keep talking. I start by telling him that dragging me out of the house today for a round of disc golf was something I would never forgive him or Hank for. And, without naming him as my prime suspect, tell him it's becoming clear I was coerced. I'm cautiously reminding him of when the three of us were halfway across the creek's bridge. I mention, without accusation, how it could be taken as an interrogation when he started asking questions about what went down yesterday at the Irishman's cottage. I say this in a casual way, but in a way that lets him know I'm on to him. I remember rapid water rushing under the bridge below us when Dickie stopped Hank and I with an inquiring hand gesture. A pulsating wave of anxiety coursed through me. Sweat began to pour when he tipped down his aviators to the middle of his nose, then shifted his eyes between us to ask one question. So, just to be clear, it was the Asian bodyguard who was wearing a tailored suit, and the boss was the tattooed ginger with the gun, right? Snorting a bump of salt from the countertop and pouring 2 more shots of tequila, Dickie tells me he noticed my swing was a little off today. Bro, all I asked was if you talked to Fuki since all that shit went down yesterday. Sweet Jesus, you looked like you were about to throw towels into water. When the tequila started hitting, it summoned the beginnings of a memory, and I found myself ranting like a truth serum. It started with the first time I lost my disc around the 6th hole, and transitioned into how I kind of blacked out after the second time. I'm warped back to the enchanted forest when the disc golf course disappeared from view. After circling back on the front 9, I watched as my purple Hercules disc once again rolled off the cliff and into the darkest, choppiest part of Cripple Creek. I could have stopped where the dead grass ceased growing and forgotten about the elusive disc, but there was a voice inside my head telling me that if I'm not the coward I think I am, I'll do what needs to be done here before that regal disc floats off into the underworld. That voice was overshadowed by another voice, however, one who shouted the F word and listened as the phrase reverberated throughout Encanto Forest. I knew the voice was my own by the deathly screech from an iron beak cawing at the sun. What choice, after all, did I ever have, other than to fall down on my knees, crying out, "God damn it, I hate this so much!" Pulling out a 12-inch Chinese smoking pistol, Dickie nods along compassionately, holding the end to light the opium pipe for me. Exhaling a sizable green hit, I recall how I tore the Sublime t-shirt from right off my back on the 12th hole. I raved and drooled when Dickie started in with his jive talk about balance again. It was before the dogleg on the 13th hole when he stopped us and pointed to the yin-yang on Hank's jiu-jitsu shirt. We stopped to look at the black and white circle we'd all seen a million times, but now that he had assigned it a name, it suddenly had a whole new meaning. I told him that I had to read the Tao Te Ching last year for school, but I didn't remember much about it except it sounded like a nice philosophy until you got punched in the face. Dickie said his abuela always told him it was a good thing that fire kills because it purifies, and Hank said it sounded like communist propaganda. Dickie scoffed, and I tried not to look like I disagreed, partly because I wasn't sure I did disagree. This idea that life is ballistic is something I struggle to wrap my head all the way around. Is there a proxy version of this life where Hank does not insist on playing an acoustic cover of The Sign by Ace of Base? Or is there a version where Demean, Gonzo, and all the rest don't end up dead? The one question I want to ask Dickie is, if everything has already been set in motion, leaving us with a mere illusion of choice, who then broke the rack in the first place?